fantastic work. I think it's really beautiful and really hard to play. Well, she must have had a really, really big hand, Clara. Liszt, he was very clever about his virtuoso stuff. He was writing incredibly impressive things, but also very efficient things. Whereas I feel like Chopin was really just writing whatever was on his heart. And then us, mortal people, have to study for many hours to get this passage right. But something like fingers, I think if you can make sense of it and if it's more comfortable for you to do it, as long as you respect what's in the score, then you might as well change it, it's fine.
Bienvenidos al canal. Hoy traigo para ustedes la entrevista que realicé al pianista lituano Rokas Valuntonis previamente a su recital en el Festival de Música de Morelia Miguel Bernal Jiménez, uno de los más importantes en México. Los invito a seguir las redes del festival y a consultar toda la programación que está disponible a través de su página de internet, y aprovecho también para agradecer al festival y a Rokas por hacer posible esta charla. Espero que la disfruten mucho.
So Rokas, it's very nice to be with you here today to talk about your next concert. You are going to play in Morelia's Music Festival, Miguel Bernal Jiménez, and well, very nice to meet you.
Thank you, very nice to be here.
Well, I want to start with you telling us about the program you're playing. If you could just tell the public what are you playing, talk maybe a little bit about the composers, the works you are playing for them.
Yes, so the idea of this recital was to actually combine male and female composers of the similar era. So I chose this two combinations. I decided to play two sonatas, which are from a classical era. So I'll play Mariana Martinez sonata and Ludwig van Beethoven sonata. So they sort of lived in Vienna, roughly the similar times. And so even though it was a very similar time, the compositions are so different. So Mariana Martinez, she was a singer as well, so her composition feels very much like something in between Baroque music and classical music.
It's for harpsichord.
Yes, it's a harpsichord sonata originally, so that's why you have all of these very delicate passages which sometimes have a reminiscence of a Baroque music. And Beethoven sonata, the Pathetique sonata, of course, one of the most famous works which led the entire classical era into the Romantic era. So it's very interesting to see how this combination works, and I think these two works really complement each other quite well because they're so different, and yet it's quite interesting to think about that they're from the same time, really. And Mariana Martinez sonata is really not played a lot. Like, you won't find too many pianists play it, and yet it's a really gorgeous work, so I'm really quite happy to bring it to life. And then, of course, pair it to something which is incredibly, well played and so much.
I read a little bit about Marianne, and it amazed me that she studied with Haydn and she played with Mozart. And
she was very connected in the Vienna's world, and she was quite appreciated in her time, and so it's quite interesting and why her works are not that often played. So I think it's quite nice to bring something from that time.
And you have also another sonata by a Lithuanian composer, I think.
So that one I included because obviously I'm Lithuanian. And so I thought I'll just start with something which is, just to bring a little bit of the Lithuanian culture. It's composer's name is Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis, and so he lived in a more like the beginning of the 20th century, the late 19th and the beginning of the 20th, and so his work is more modern. And he was not only a composer but also a painter. So his music has a lot of colors. And so this particular work, it's called the Little Sonata, and it's written on one theme. So you have 4 movements and one theme, and that one theme was actually composed by a child. So he was living at the time in Warsaw, and he had sponsors. And so one of his sponsors' daughter, she was learning music, and he was like, why don't you like write me a small little theme, and then I'll write a piece on it. And so she did, and in Lithuania this is quite often played and really quite beautiful work. And so I thought I'll just, bring this work here.
I was curious, in Lithuania, Lithuanian pianists and Lithuanian schools of music, they encourage a lot that you play music from Lithuania in your country, but also when you go abroad. It's that really encouraged, because here in Mexico, I think that's starting to happen a lot, encouraging young people to play the music from their country, and also pianists to play music from their composers abroad. But it's something that's just starting, and I know that in other countries maybe that's even more encouraged. Like Russian pianists, for example, they almost always program some Russian music in their
Well, the thing about Lithuania is it's a small country. It's about 2.8 million, I think, with the entire population of Lithuanians in Lithuania and who lives abroad. It's about 3 million people. So it's a small, amount of people. And so obviously, as a small nation, we're trying to, put ourselves on the map. So my job as a Lithuanian is to bring out some of the, as much as I can, and to show Lithuanian culture and music especially, And yes, so Čiurlionis is our national hero, so that's why I'm bringing his works.
How would you describe it for someone that has never listened to his music, the sound he has? Because I listened to the Little Sonata, and it sounded a little bit like maybe Rachmaninoff or something like that. But later I saw he also composed nocturnes and mazurkas.
Yes, so he was actually very influenced by Chopin, and so that's why he used a lot of the genres. And also he obviously studied in Warsaw in Poland, so that's why his music is quite affected. So this is young Čiurlionis is quite reminiscent of Chopin, and the late Čiurlionis is maybe a bit more reminiscent of something like Scriabin or something like modern. But he had quite a unique harmonies, which I don't even know who to compare it with. It's like a more modern, more interesting chords and twists, and it's very quite emotional, quite often quite dark. And if to understand Čiurlionis' music, you should probably see some of his paintings, because his paintings and his music was very, very connected. And so his paintings were very musical, and his music was very picturesque, if I can put this to... So in his paintings, you will see sometimes a triptych, for example, or a sonata, paintings of a sonata. So he would have movements, and then you would see the musicality, and then sometimes you would see a fugue, there's a hidden notes of a fugue, how the voices move in the painting. So, and they're quite sometimes abstract a little bit, and kind of interesting pastel colors. And it's a very interesting style, and really quite beautiful. And I think that reflects in music as well. He creates these characters and these very sort of blending colors almost in a way. So that's why it's fun to play. So these pieces I will be playing, they're all really unique and quite different, in terms of sonatas, right? So you have 3 sonatas, completely different. Čiurlionis, really interesting, the beginning of the 20th century. And then Mariano Martinez, which is almost Baroque classical between. And then we have Beethoven, who leads us into the Romantic era.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the sonata, Marianne's sonata. How do you approach something that was written for the harpsichord and play it on the piano? I mean, harpsichord is played very differently from from pianists from the pure technical point, and also they maybe roll a lot of chords, they improvise some ornamentations.
Yes.
Do you do something like that on the piano, or you play more like a pianist?
No, definitely. So I'm quite familiar. I played a lot of works which are written for harpsichord. I played a lot of Rameau, of Couperin, French, Baroque harpsichordist. Played a lot of Scarlatti, who actually wrote quite a lot of sonatas for harpsichord. Anyway, and so this kind of an interesting style, which I find is really fun to play, because on the piano, obviously, you have the element of the dynamic. So there's completely new element now involved, which you must, I think, use, because obviously you have this new tool now.
The pedals also.
The pedal, but mainly is the dynamic, like how many codes you can create. On harpsichord, you would have 2 manuals, which you can create like beautiful colors. But on the piano, you have all these levels, you can do. So I'm using quite a lot of this to push the piece to extremes, which you would not probably be able to do on the harpsichord. But also I pay my respect to the harpsichord, and I'm trying to recreate sort of a similar touch and similar sound, and the ornamentation, which is maybe a bit more secco, more dry, and something which is elegant and like a nice shapes,
Maybe more from the fingers and not a weight technique.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
From the Pathetic Sonata, I wanted to ask you, but because I read that was a name that he actually gave to the sonata, but then I saw a masterclass with Andras Schiff.
I don't think he gave this.
Yeah.
Beethoven did not really name his sonata.
Yeah.
Moonlight and Pathétique, I think these were given a bit later. Yeah. Obviously, these sonatas have such a strong feel to them, such a clear message. I think the names naturally appear. But as far as I know, he didn't really call his sonata Pathétique. I hope I'm not mistaken here, but this is the information I know.
I was confused because I thought that name, he actually gave it to the sonata, but then I heard Andras Schiff said that he didn't, and then I was a little confused. So I wanted to ask you, do you have any, this is more of a pianist question, but do you work with just one edition? You have a preferred edition of the sonatas, the Beethoven sonatas specifically?
I just work with Henley.
Henley, yeah.
I work with Henley, Vienna Urtext. These are the 2 main ones I go to usually. So, but I think it's a pretty standard. Everybody uses Henley these days.
Yeah. I wanted to ask this because maybe sometimes there are pianists that like some older editions. I don't know, the Czerny editions, just because he studied with him.
Yeah, I don't know. The edition is an interesting thing. At the end of the day, I'm not such a geek about the tiniest little thing. To me, more important is the message. But obviously, I want to have as the edition as close to the original, so that there's not so many added things, So Henley, Vienna Urtext is something I go to for the classical music. Yeah. Maybe something else for the romantics, for sure.
Well, in this case, it's also very difficult because you're playing some of Clara Schumann's works, and also Robert Schumann. And I mean, for Beethoven and Robert, there are 1,000 editions, but for Marianne, for Clara,
it was actually hard to find the scores.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite tricky.
How did you find it finally?
I found them online, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just bought them offline. There was not too much of the, selection like I didn't have. So.
I was surprised to find a recording of the Marianne's sonatas online, because I thought maybe I won't find any.
Yeah. There is just very little, but there is a few people I think recorded it.
The little sonata I just found from, how do you pronounce MK?
Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis.
Yeah, sorry, I am really bad at pronouncing.
No, it is. It's Lithuanian names are not easy to pronounce.
Yeah, I found a recording of the little sonata on YouTube or on Spotify. there was other works, but not that little sonata. I really like
so
it.
Little Sonata, you couldn't find the recording?
No, in Spotify there's nothing. In YouTube there's a recording of a young pianist playing it pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
And I could hear it, but I couldn't find the Little Sonata anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's the first half maybe of your program, and the other half are Clara and Robert.
Yes,
And
well, obviously
can you talk a little bit?
the combination of these two. Well, to me, I just thought, I mean, this is a pretty straightforward, like quite a famous, I think, combination to play, Clara and Robert, both fantastic composers, both fantastic pianists. And so these works, again, so Schumann's Carnival is probably one of the most recognized works that he composed. And it's just just this fantastic celebration of piano playing, really, and what piano is capable of creating. To me, Carnival is really not even a piece. To me, this is a play. It's literally a play with all the characters, and the imagination of this composer is completely incredible. And so I was looking for work to sort of oppose, or not even oppose, but just to sort of go well with it. And so the romances of Clara Schumann, I thought they are very, different to this bright, beautiful carnival. The romances, they're more sort of dark, more deep somehow. And the first one out of the three is really sort of, it's quite steady and quite like sort of a slow pace, almost a procession-like feeling to it. And so all these three, they're quite different to one another, and I think they're quite different to Carnival, and again, not so often played. I discovered them just through the research. I've never actually heard anyone play them live.
Yeah, no, I think in recent years a lot of people are playing more of Clara's works, but I've seen the concerto program a lot, and not so much these little works.
No, it's fantastic work. I think it's really beautiful and really hard to play somehow.
I was amazed to see the intervals on the first one. They are big intervals. I mean, I don't know.
But that's actually not the word. The third one has incredibly wide intervals and very fast pace. And well, she must have had a really, really big hand, Clara, because I'm in the constant maximum stretch, and you have to control the sound in a particular way, and so technically it's a really demanding work, and yet it sounds so full.
It sounds easy.
And so easy, exactly.
If you don't see the score, you're this sounds easy.
No, it's a really interesting to actually get my hands on this work and just to see, because I feel like whenever we play these works from the past, you have actually quite an intimate relationship with the composer, because the composer was sitting there, in the room at the time and was just, trying these things. And so the composer wrote what's the closest to, its heart.
Yeah.
And so now we have this on a piece of paper, and then we're actually using the same muscles and recreating the same positions, and the same sound and the same emotion. So it's a really interesting way of communicating with a person, who's, long gone, but we can still have that connection. So it was very interesting because a lot of composers, I play a lot, but this is the first piece I played by Clara Schumann, really. I think I played maybe one little work by her, which was But this is like these romances are a bit more serious, and so I'm having a lot of fun, and it's really quite a nice process to actually recreate these romances.
Yeah, it's really amazing because I heard that Liszt actually praised about Clara, and that someone like Liszt that was the great pianist of
I
their
think
time.
probably Liszt, found a challenge in it.
in what she was right.
Yeah.
Also, the romances I think are some of the last works she wrote, and I found that really interesting because a lot of composers like Beethoven, the last sonatas, well, he didn't write more just because he passed away, but Clara actually stopped writing music. She lived a lot longer, but she dedicated herself more to spread the words of other people, and I found that very interesting because the festival is doing an effort to bring light to these women composers.
Yeah. No, it's a really good idea, I think. It's fantastic. So.
Yeah. Can you talk us about a little more of Carnival? It's a very dense work in the sense that I think sometimes we go to concerts, at least here in Mexico, and a lot of people, including me, I am also a pianist, but
I figured that.
yeah. But even me, I just heard a little while ago Chrysleriana, and I had never heard that work, and I didn't knew anything about it. And I think Schumann was also criticized a little bit in his time because his work were a little bit difficult for the audience. But I think maybe if the audience knows a little more about the work, it's a little bit easier.
Well, I guess maybe at the time, because the thing is, he was actually composing in very unusual forms and shapes. That's why very creative personality, and obviously, like what he does with music, it just feels like it's almost spontaneous and improvisational like. And that's what I like about Carnival. I played quite a few of his big works. I played Fantasy Stücke and
Symphonic Studies. Maybe.
I played Symphonic Studies. I played his Kinderscenen. And so these all big works, they have this incredible sort of feel of storytelling and connectivity throughout the works. So like a Fantasy Stücke, there's 8 of them, but they're just like so smoothly connected. Carnival is like 21 of them. So they're just, it just starts and it's just a long, beautiful story until the end. And to me, I found this work really, really fun to play. I thought that it's going to be a bit harder for me to figure it out, how to shape it. There's always an issue with big works. How will you make them interesting and not too long and too boring? But I feel like Carnival is written in such a way that you have so many pieces, so many like little pieces that are interacting with each other. It feels like you're brought into the actual carnival and you're interacting with the characters.
And it's pretty interesting, the references. One of them is Chopin and Paganini.
Yes. So the Schumann was anyway. So I'm always talking about his creativity, but it's I think worth mentioning that he was also a writer, a critic, and so he saw himself in these 3 personas. He was Eusebius, Florestan, and Raro, and so he was not only in his compositions but in his writing, in articles, he would use these personas to describe something, and so it's kind of multiple personality in one. So, and that's in music is very, evidently conveyed as well. And so this carnival, he brings obviously all of the characters that he admires. And so there's a hidden, references. There's also Clara. There's also, his, I forgot her name, but his fiancée at that time. And
which this work was inspired
yes,
by her.
yes, yeah, exactly. But so like he doesn't write their original names, but he like sort of hides the message in there. So it's more a bit of a speculation. And he has the Paganini, you know, he has all of these people who he thinks that they are really noble people who are doing true art, and he calls them Davidsbündlers. So Davidsbündler is a term he invented for like the true artists. And the other side is the Philistines, the people who like salon music, not serious music. And so the entire purpose of this work is to show that the Davidsbündlers will win at the end. And so at the last piece, you have the big march of Davidsbündlers in a triumph and a victory against the Philistines. And so it's just a perfect way to just wrap things up. And, you know, you get a little glimpse into Schumann's fantastic world of, you know, characters and colors and all of that. So I thought, you know, where else can I play this better than in Mexico, the most colorful, you know, country on the planet.
The pictures of you at the Dia de Muertos festival. And I think you saw a lot of color there.
Yeah, the last year I was also touring in Mexico, so I was here during the time of Dia de los Muertos, so it was really nice. It was the first time I was actually visiting the country, so it was really like, you know, my eyes.
Something,
a
lot of color, And he also has a kind of a puzzle, a cryptical puzzle, musical puzzle in the work. I read that he tried to compose the carnival with some letters of his name, like A, S.
Oh, yes. So you have a pieces with the encrypted, and that's not the first time he used that. Quite a lot in his music. And he's not the only one. You have the, you know, Bach, who constantly did that. And I think he takes that idea from Bach as well. So it's quite a fun thing, just to code. There's a lot of, you know, codes and hidden messages in there. It's really quite brilliant composer.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk about that, because I think when people see that or know about all this story behind the composition, maybe it's a little bit easier to also assimilate the work.
It's true. The thing is, of course, we can talk so much about the little, you know, like it would be quite nice to just talk about all the 21, you know, pieces. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's a play, and it is a music which you listen, and then you just, sometimes it's quite nice to imagine yourself thing. A good side and a bad side of a programmic music, whereas it's quite nice to know the program, but sometimes it's quite nice not to know the program. So you can have your own ideas and your own feelings about it, you know. So it's it's an audience choice, how much they want to know about the piece beforehand.
Well, I think we talk about the program a lot, but I also wanted to talk with you a little bit about piano, about how do you manage to study or maintain yourself prepared, traveling all this much. We are here in a hotel recording this, and I didn't see a piano anywhere here, so I don't know how do you practice when you are traveling. And I also think you were playing other concerts recently in a lot of different places.
Yeah, I did. So I had like a different repertoire, different programs I played.
Yeah.
I played in Lithuania, I played in United Kingdom, and I had a completely different program. It's funny you mentioned Lithuanian composer Čiurlionis sounding a bit like Chopin, because I just recently did a program which is Čiurlionis and Chopin, and like how they're connected. And so I did quite recently program of that, and I had a totally different program with some of the transcriptions of Franz Schubert Liszt songs and stuff like that. So it's
a lot of hard repertoire.
Yeah. So, but to be honest, you know, like I just kind of, you know, you calculate your time, and traveling is really just it's the end product. You know, the main work is when you sit at the piano and you figure things out. And then when you play them enough and you perform them enough, then you have them in your hands. Then you get to go and travel, and it's fine not to have a piano, for a while.
I've always admired that capacity of pianists, of concert pianists, to be on the road and also be very prepared, maybe even sometimes without rehearsal time before the concert, and they just play and do it.
Yeah, well, I think it all depends on the preparation, really. If you have, if you prepared well enough, and especially if you played the program, beforehand. It's always the hardest thing is to bring out the new repertoire, and just to see how it feels with the audience, and just to see how people react. We play, but it feels like we're just doing our thing, but it's actually such a big connection with the audience. Like I can hear the tiniest little breath and tiniest little, wiggle of, people. And so by that, I always sort of adapt and readjust, and like trying to always have people engaged. Anyway, so this is kind of like preparation that you cannot do at home, on your piano. Because you need a live audience to see how this communication really works. That's why to bring out the first time pieces is the hardest. But if this is not the first time you're playing, and if you already had this communication, you can predict what things will be nice and fun to hear, which ones are less. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's we're all human. Sometimes it works better. Sometimes it works worse. Yeah.
From the program you're playing, you said the Clara's pieces were new.
Yeah, but I did perform them already. This is not the first time. Yeah.
And the other repertoire, it's also.
Yeah, I mean it's quite new, but I've been playing this for the last, I think, 3 months.
Yeah.
So it's
the Pathétique, I guess you.
Yeah, Pathétique is maybe a few years old. Yeah. It's still not like I didn't play it a long time ago. It's a kind of a recent addition to my repertoire, because I always wanted to play, but it's always this endless list of pieces that you want to play, and so the Schumann Carnival was actually like on my agenda for many years. So I'm really glad that finally I had time to grab this.
Do you have a favorite composer? Beethoven, Schumann, Chopin, someone with whom you connect more, or maybe 2 or 3? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have one definitely, but to me it's usually the piece that just like connects and touches me. Sometimes I don't play a composer, but then sometimes I stumble upon a piece, and that's like a gateway for me to explore more of the composer. I always loved Chopin. I always played a lot of Chopin, and I always loved Liszt. I always liked the challenge, the technical challenges that he presents, and the passion, this raw romantic, flair that you have in Liszt, Franz Liszt music. So I think I played a lot of Chopin, and Liszt is probably the most repertoire I have. But also, I was always a big fan of Mozart. I was always a big fan of Scarlatti. I played a lot of Scarlatti sonatas, and just the fact that he was, one of the first people to sort of come up with like what can be recognized as a sonata now.
Very different from what we think a sonata is.
Yes, exactly, because it is not, fully developed sonata just yet. But Scarlatti used a lot of new techniques, from a technical side, the usage of glissandos and such a big usage of the thumbs as well. Like it's interesting to go through the repetitions. A very good point. Yeah. So it's quite fun to sort of see what was new at that particular time, and because we know obviously all this repertoire right now, but so we don't really sometimes think of how innovative it was at that particular time. Anyway, so I would say yes, I'm kind of more of a romantic, but I really quite like Baroque as well. I'm just classical. I'm just naming all of the entire music, pretty much.
Well, I mean, Chopin was inspired a lot by Bach, so maybe it's not.
Yeah.
There are no opposites exactly.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? This kind of a musicality that goes through that line of Mozart and then Chopin, maybe Debussy, this melodic lines, and then you maybe have something more of a structure like Beethoven, Liszt, Ravel.
Yeah, also very different because, well, I wanted to ask you, you said you play a lot of Liszt, and I have always found that even when Liszt writes some virtuoso music, I have always found it a little bit more comfortable. Chopin, a lot of the things I think they are weird on the hand, and Liszt has a kind of writing that, yeah, it's difficult, but it's kind of more comfortable. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think about that?
It's a very good point, actually. It's very interesting because obviously completely different techniques. Feels like it was completely different hands. But you're right. So Liszt, he was very clever about his virtuoso stuff. He was writing incredibly impressive things, but also very efficient things. Whereas I feel like Chopin was really just writing whatever was on his heart. And if it's really, really complicated and very demanding, he doesn't care, he can do it. And then us, mortal people, have to study for many hours to get this passage right. But yeah, you're right, the Chopin sometimes is very uncomfortable to play. Like I played a few years ago his Opus 10 of Etudes. And so just to play the 12 etudes from the beginning till the end was so challenging for the hand. But at the end of the day, if you practice them enough, it's also very satisfying for the hand somehow. I felt like many times that my hand kind of wants these positions, these weird, it feels like a massage almost in a way, or like a sport or an exercise, even though like it's the most uncomfortable, really crazy and very difficult work. But yeah, you're right. I think Liszt was maybe more calculative of what his, like, how impressive it sounds and how efficient will it be when it comes to these kind of, because he was transcribing a lot of music, like from operas, from symphonies, so he obviously had to make it work on the piano, and then he was absolutely a master of that.
Also, Beethoven, I think it's also uncomfortable sometimes because I don't know if you agree with this, but I think he just writes whatever music comes to mind. And he doesn't care about
absolutely. But that's kind of interesting point, because this is what I feel also Beethoven and Schumann, they just did what they wanted, and they were just so creative with their structures. It doesn't have to follow a particular rule. If you can make it work, like even these times, like, because in school, in academy, we used to study, classical forms, and then you'd stumble on the Beethoven sonata, and you need to analyze the structure, and it's so crazy sometimes. So
doesn't fit.
So all the musicologists are like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, "I don't care about you. I don't want my music to be defined." He just does what he wants, and then yet somehow it works really beautifully. So he does, and obviously he was an incredible pianist. So yeah, of course it's going to be demanding. It's not going to be simple. But as you say, the same thing about Liszt, it's going to be comfortable to play because they would know exactly how it works.
How the hand works, yeah. Like in the Pathetique, do you find that spot in the first movement, the crossed hands section, do you find it uncomfortable or no? The jumps?
Yeah, I mean it is challenging.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I asked about the edition, because sometimes I've seen some editions with some fingerings that are really weird, or at least for me are really weird for the.
I just usually use my own fingers. I don't really rely on I find something what's comfortable for me. And if you can, to me, it's not the addition or fingers, or it's really the message. If you can convey the message accurately, then you can use whatever you want. It's like Ravel's Gaspard Pellegrini. All the people kind of play their own arrangement of Scarbo, because the hands are constantly on top of each other, and so how you figure it out.
Yeah.
you know, and then it will depend, like the sound will depend which hand you'll play it. So you have to come up with the good solutions, but everybody plays it different.
But I find it very interesting because I think a lot of students and a lot of schools, at least here in Mexico, are very obsessed with following what the edition says. In this case,
you have to be in the
FIMM.
education.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand everything exactly how it works in order to later maybe deviate from that original plan. But again, so I am not saying that you should not follow what's in the... But something like fingers, I think if you can make sense of it and if it's more comfortable for you to do it, as long as you respect what's in the score, then you might as well change it, it's fine.
Yeah, I have one final question precisely about the pathetic. Do you find some similarity between that and Mozart's sonata in C minor? A lot of people mention even one theme, I think, from the second movement. It's very like second movement of the pathetic, but I don't know if you have heard that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I never thought about it. I never actually considered them to be very similar.
Me neither. I just saw this kind of hint somewhere, and I heard it, and yeah, it's even the same harmony, but I didn't know. I mean, sometimes things can be alike.
I
But
think so, yeah. I mean, it's hard to say, but and I think in the world of composition, probably, obviously, if you like some works, you'll get influenced by them, and maybe you'll write something similar, but I don't know. I never actually thought that they're too much alike.
just to finalize with this interview, there's anything you would like to add about the program or to say to the public that it's going to see you in concert at the festival?
Well, I just hope that public will enjoy it. That's my own, that's my only goal, is just to have that nice connection with the audience. It's always that's a very interesting. It's not like you meet someone and you talk to someone face to face, because it's a very different kind of relationship, and you share something very intimate. And so obviously, like when I'm on stage, I'm very vulnerable. It's like I'm just there and I'm just giving like all my heart to the audience. And so the only hope for me is just so that it's received, that's all I really want. And so I hope everyone has a good time really at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think they will. And well, I want to thank you for speaking with me, and I would like to thank also the festival for organizing all of this. And well, I hope everyone goes see Rokas concert in the festival.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.